Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled, "Neighbor cut down 60 trees on my property in the middle of the night without permission." Last year, my wife and I purchased our first home, and boy, was it a fixer-upper. As a matter of fact, most of the large but old homes in the area were going up for sale. Some were already renovated, some were still in dire need of TLC, but no one could deny that these big and beautiful houses in the rustic backwoods of Missouri were a steal of a deal. There were probably about 13 houses along a deep stretch of land that backed up onto a lake. The area is also heavily wooded, some of it just being overgrown weeds and saplings, and other parts are full of large and mature trees of different varieties. Our home had a decent view of the lake, even with all of our trees. My wife and I had wondered about removing some of them, but decided against it when we realized how much we enjoyed their beauty and shade. Maybe raking would be a bit of a pain, but it is worth the view in the fall when the leaves change their fabulous colors of orange and red. The neighbors to the north and south of us had a less appealing view of the water, but they could see it nonetheless. I suppose if you were to cut down some of the trees on our property that were near the back, they could see the lake better, but I'm sorry, marrying the wonderful oak and maple trees in my yard is not worth their view. Anyway, my neighbor named Lee purchased his house only a few months after we had moved in, and since he has been next door to us, all he has ever talked about was how he could have a better view of the lake if we just chopped down a few of them trees. It was honestly so annoying. Almost every time that we would hold a conversation with him for more than a few minutes, he would bring it up. I'll admit that he wasn't a terrible guy, and he had his funny sense of humor and was always nice. His wife would even give us any extra baked goods she made because she didn't want Lee to eat any more. I guess he was at risk for diabetes or something. One day he decided that he would propose to me to help him pay for the tree removal, and that putting in a walking trail to get to the water where he docks his boat during the summer would benefit all of us. While I will admit that this is actually a smart play by him, I'm still not willing to do so. My wife was willing to bite, but I continued to stay firm on keeping my beautiful trees. I do want to say that we did clear a lot of the overgrown foliage and kept a few of the smaller and less mature trees. There was one tree that I did opt to take down, and that was because it was nearly dead and I was worried about how it was leaning over the roof. The backyard was starting to look really nice. I had even put a fire pit in the back with some really interesting river rock and custom-made benches. They were built out of the oak tree that we had to chop down. The carpenter said that the wood was in good enough shape to still use. Lee would come and go and talk to us occasionally as we sat out by the fire or on our back deck eating breakfast. There was no indication to me that he would actually do what he did. I guess I should have smelled something fishy, besides him, when he was jokingly mentioning cutting the trees down again one night after a few beers. He had been out fishing all day and was pissed that he didn't have some walking trail to use to haul his wagon with his cooler and bucket of bass. A few days later, on a beautiful late summer morning, the humidity was finally lowering and the sun felt less suffocating. I got up to make my morning coffee, and the vastly different view from my sliding glass door caught my eye immediately. The tree line in the back of the yard was gone, all of the trees. Except one. One of the larger and older trees near the middle that overlooked the fire pit area was still standing. But only dozens of stumps remained of my once beautiful tree line. The image in my head of the gorgeous orange and red fall leaves blanketing the ground was ruined. How dare Lee overstep this way and devastate my property like this? My wife woke up from all my exclaiming and cussing and knew right away what had happened. She stood in shock at the back door and cried as I spewed curse words and threats to our neighbors' well-being and safety behind her. I don't hesitate to get on forums about tree law where I am directed to call an arborist to assess the actual damage to the property. My husband handled calling the police to make a report of the property damage itself for our future lawyer. I restrained myself from marching right over to that man's house and giving him a piece of my mind and fist. The arborist was quick to come over and give me a breakdown of my losses. The guy made a comment when handing me the paperwork. He said, "I know you lost a lot of trees, but you just inherited a ton of money," and casually walked away. I watched him walk away and then looked down at the paper. According to what he found, my neighbor cut down 61 trees, which comes out to be a little under $400,000 in damages, not counting any extra costs that the judge may award for damage to property, trespassing, and court fees. This seemed crazy, but hey, cannot complain about winning almost $500,000 off some trees. A few days pass and the lawyer we have hired sends Lee his paperwork stating that we are suing him for property damage. However, we had to prove that it was him that actually did it. And that was something I didn't have yet. I called around to try and find what company came and did this overnight, like some kind of tree cutting ninjas, but no luck. The week ended and I was starting to worry about how we were supposed to prove that Lee indeed was the culprit. My wife was thinking that we may have to drop the case if we couldn't find some kind of evidence to point in his direction. We had tons of footprints in the yard after it first happened, but couldn't say that one set specifically went to his house. That was probably the best bet at the time. Then it is like God really was listening. A knock came at my door that Sunday morning. My other neighbor from the north side of us was standing with a French press full of coffee and a USB drive. "I got something that you may want to see." Honestly, it was like something out of a movie. First of all, I have only met this woman once. She is a few years older than my wife and I, and has one son that goes to the local college. As far as I know, she is some kind of wildlife enthusiast and always seems to be outside in her garden working. Apparently, she is the only person that has maintained living here over the last 30 years. I invited her inside out of sheer curiosity and I did not have any idea what information she had that I could need. Come to find out, Darla was her name and she had 2 wildlife cameras posted in her backyard. One that looks towards her garden and bird feeders and another that looks across the yard towards the lake. Only this view catches a real nice shot of a large portion of my yard. That's right, Darla had caught on camera that a-hole having my trees cut down. Thankfully, her camera had excellent night vision to try and see animals in the dark, making it really easy to catch everything from that night. Darla was kind enough to let me keep the USB drive and I quickly handed it off to my lawyer. This information and video evidence was all I needed in court. Lee had clearly made himself scarce since his midnight tree massacre, plus he has already been served papers from our lawyer. It was only a month later that we had our day in court. It did not take very long for the judge to reach a conclusion. The evidence of him leading a crew of guys into my yard and cutting over 60 trees down was undeniable. The judge lectured the old man for a minute, telling him that he was honestly being lenient and that we could be asking for more compensation. The total came out to over $416,000. We practically skipped out of there. Now, don't get me wrong, I did actually feel bad for taking Lee for that much money, plus I did like his wife and her baked goods a lot. But it turns out Lee had a crap ton of money stashed away and was pretty quick to pay us back. Plus he was generous to replace several of them, without us asking, with some older trees of my choice. Lee actually still lives next door to us and his wife still brings me baked goods from time to time, but we are not exactly chummy. And ripe stars, I am wondering, what would you do if your neighbor decided to cut more than 60 trees down on your own property in the middle of the night? I think what OP did here was definitely the right way, and I guess that Lee neighbor learned a very expensive lesson. Either way, if you enjoy the stories about crazy neighbors and tree law, then please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments and maybe even like the video if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is titled Don't cheat on your taxes and then try to start trouble with me. Sometimes the easiest way to deal with an asshat is to get accountants and the government involved. It all started out normally enough. Through some acquaintances, my SO and I met a couple that had just recently moved close to where we were living. We attended their housewarming and spent a few other nights hanging out. It would really be nothing to write home about if my SO had not come to me asking me why the guy in this other couple messaged him, letting him know that his girlfriend was convinced that I was trying to steal her boyfriend. If that sentence left you confused, I was confused too. The girlfriend didn't say a word to me, but spun some tale to her boyfriend, who also didn't say anything to me, but started messaging my SO this nonsense. The boyfriend, unattractive doesn't describe him, but it starts to come close. If he was the last man on earth, I would become very familiar with my right hand. As you might imagine, it is hard to definitely prove that you didn't do something, and it wasn't just flirting that I apparently engaged in, according to them. I was apparently running my mouth about all sorts of stuff and causing issues for them. I apparently told nameless others that he was cheating on her and that she was cheating on him and that she was only in it for the money, and on and on. I am saying nameless because they were never produced, because it never happened. I am convinced that it was something she made up. It became a they said she said with my SO in the middle. Redditors, I honestly didn't do any of the stuff that I got accused of. It was all catching me totally off guard. I told them to bugger off and broke all the ties. 2 months later, I get a message asking me why I was sending snail mail letters to the boyfriend's mother, implying that the girlfriend was a stripper. I did not know the mother or the address and thought that the girlfriend was a drama woman but not a streetwalker. This time I'd really had enough though. I did not want them and their drama making regular reappearances in my life. A conversation that I had overheard between the boyfriend and another guy popped into my head while I was seeing red. The boyfriend owned his own company and had been bragging about how he did not pay his taxes, and neither did his company. And by the way guys, that is a pretty stupid thing to brag about. I know my way around the internet a little bit, so I started researching him and his company. I took screenshots of what I found, which included 2 different instances of him confessing to the tax evasions on social media sites. I read far too many comment threads and posts of his and discovered his presence on some eye-raising sites in the process. I took what I had and both mailed hard copies to a few local IRS criminal investigator agents, as well as emailed it to them. After I was done looking up the boyfriend and his companies, I started looking up the information of people in the local IRS office who would be tasked with investigating him. I corresponded with one of the IRS agents briefly, and then there was a silent pause in which I had considered it all going nowhere, and then I heard it through the grapevine. IRS agents had shown up at his home. They had investigated him and his company. Together he owed something close to $2 million in back taxes. It had been years since he had paid both. He ended up having to downsize his lifestyle a bit to start making payments. I know he had started hiding some of his assets by putting them in her name, so I know that the girlfriend got dragged into the investigation too. I think that it all freaked his girlfriend out and stressed their relationship because she ended up leaving him shortly after it all started. I still honestly don't understand what the point of all of the accusations was. My SO does not have any insights either. I know I probably should have directed more of my efforts towards the girlfriend, but he was the one who unknowingly and unintentionally gave me some nice ammunition to extract some revenge against the both of them. He is now working to pay what he owes, and she is now living at home and working in retail. They don't talk. I have not heard a peep from either one of them for the last almost 2 years, so I am satisfied with how things ended. They don't know that it was me who gave the IRS much of what they needed. The next one is titled, "You run away to be with some guy you met on the internet? Your daughter hates you now." This happened a couple of years back. I will try to keep it as short as I can with as much detail as I can. I was married for 12 years, my wife was a wonderful person, we had many laughs together and many great times as well. However, she also happened to be full of crap. Between the years of 2004 and 2007, she had multiple affairs, including my daughter's first grade teacher, the security guard in the building where she worked, and the son of one of her friends. This went on for 3 years behind my back. I had no clue she was a cheating Karen. During the summer of 2007, I discovered the affairs. I confronted her with it and she did not deny it. But instead of, taking responsibility for it, she told me she was running away to be with some dude she met on the internet. I thought she was joking and didn't take it seriously, but the next morning she was gone. Neither me nor my daughter saw her for a year and a half. It hurt her a lot because she really looked up to her mom. Finally, I got sick of hoping she would come back and I filed for divorce on the grounds of abandonment. She eventually came back and tried to act like nothing happened. It didn't matter because I got full custody. She also tried to sue me for alimony, but that failed miserably as well. The revenge? Letting her screw herself over. She lost all of her friends, is in a ton of debt, and her parents hate her. She works as a waitress at a restaurant and is living with random people off of Craigslist. But what I know hurts her the most is my daughter, who is now 17, wants absolutely nothing to do with her. She got her visitation rights terminated by the courts, so she cannot see her either. The most pro-revenge anyone could take is letting someone F themselves over. It is just priceless. And the next one is titled A Clean Stripe of Petty Revenge. In the late 1970s, I used to do window washing for a living in Crescent City, California. Window washing, while necessary due to the sea salt in the air, was a very difficult job because jobs only could be done in the morning before it became so warm as to evaporate the cleaning solution before you could clean it off, and you could only look for work in the morning because those who could agree to hire you to clean were only there in the morning. The town had only one hardware store and their windows were so filthy they were the color of cardboard and almost as opaque. The owner told me to come back the next day and then say it was not a good time and tell me to come back tomorrow. He did this all week. This cost me a lot of potential work as I kept the morning open to do the job. One employee told me that the owner was a greedy penny pincher who has done this to every person looking to clean his windows, and that they had not been cleaned since the store opened some 20 years ago, and warned me that I was wasting my time. The business had several large picture windows. A few months later I was to move back to Magalia, CA, and I needed to catch the Greyhound bus at 5:30 the next morning. Crescent City businesses used to shut down about 6 p.m. each day, so I got out my equipment and rode my bike to the hardware store after closing and cleaned just one stripe right down the center of the largest window in the front of the store and went home. The next morning, as the Greyhound bus passed by the hardware store, I laughed out loud. All the windows were cleaned. I would not be surprised if the owner was out there directing employees to throw eggs and dirt to get the window to look uniformly dirty to avoid the expense of cleaning them all before giving up. I hope whoever cleaned those windows got a good wad of cash for their work, but I would not be surprised to learn that that was the first and the last time those windows were cleaned until this day. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.